when you look at Palestinian DNA, there's a lot of strong overlap between Jewish DNA.
This is a different type of Hamas leadership that has no problem burning babies and targeting civilians in such a brutal manner. Yes, at one time, Hamas was, in the 1970s, the organization providing hospitals and meals, but since the 1980s has been involved in...
Just give me some perspective on what is it like right now in Israel.
So in my honest opinion, I do really think that Hamas needs to be...
Can you share a bit about some of the things that are going on the ground right now, and just kind of your perspective, not towards the leadership, but towards the Palestinian people? I was recently researching this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I was looking at was that when you look at Palestinian DNA, there's a lot of strong overlap between Jewish DNA, in that this group of people, though obviously some of them were Arabs that came in from other parts, but a lot of these folks, from my understanding, were probably Jews, that some that may have became Christian, and then some that were forced into conversion to Islam with the conquest of this region, right? And so I've heard guys like Rudy Israel, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, I follow him, and that they refer to Palestinians as their cousins. And it's just very gentle, like, guys, we have to figure this out somehow. And so can you just kind of share some of your perspective towards the Palestinian people, and then we can kind of go into this latest conflict. We don't need, I understand there's a super deep geopolitical history to it, but just kind of your perspective towards Palestinians.
Okay, so I'm very pro-Palestinian. I want to be able to live side by side with my Palestinian brothers and sisters. So I don't equate the average Palestinian to the leadership of Hamas. That's and it shouldn't be equated. I have many Palestinian friends. The institution I used to work for, Ortar Stone, had great relationships with the local Palestinian communities that were surrounding it. In this country, as far as the state of Israel, 21% of our citizens are not Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
There has been an Arab part of the Supreme Court. The person who actually indicted and jailed our former Prime Minister, Ehud Olmert, put him in jail, was an Arab. Everyone has equal rights to healthcare and education. So I don't see that you have to be anti-anybody in this. So I look at it as that we need to be able to do relationships on the ground, and there's ways to do it. Mm-hmm. Israel has been on the forefront that I would say covenant land comes with covenant responsibility. And therefore, for me, Christian Arabs specifically are considered a minority because they're caught between ethnicity and religion, both on the Palestinian side and on the Israeli side. And it becomes my stewardship to ensure the integrity of the Christian Arab living here is uplifted.
Yeah, that's good. And that was the thing that I did find interesting, David, is when I was in Israel last year, I found it interesting that I'm Armenian, and so I was privileged to go to the Armenian quarter, and we went to a couple Armenian restaurants in the Christian quarter and hung out. And what I was intrigued by was that the Armenians tend to identify closer with the Arabs there than with the Jews, and also that a lot of the Christians are either Armenian or Palestinian. We went to the oldest tattoo shop in the world, which is in the old city, Jerusalem, and I got a Jerusalem cross tatted on me and a little resurrection symbol. And I found out that they were Palestinian Christians that go back 30 generations in Jerusalem. And so that was very, very interesting, because I didn't know such a thing existed until I started kind of diving in and understanding the process. And so it's awesome to hear you say that you have a heart for the Arab community, and specifically the Christian Arab community, because they are the minority in Israel.
Yeah. I would even go further. The inspiration of working with the British pre-state actually came from, unfortunately, the Armenian genocide that took place in the Ottoman Empire.
That's right.
So I don't know if you know this. There's a community in Israel called Zichron Yaakov. Mm-hmm. And there was a group of people who were the spies pre-state to help out the British, to give them intelligence on how to enter into Palestine back then. Mm-hmm. And it's because Sarah Aronson witnessed the genocide happening to the Armenians.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting, because you have the Armenian genocide, which inspired the Holocaust, and his logic was, who remembers the Armenians? And then you have Armenians in Israel helping to create an Israeli state because they saw what happened to the Armenians.
Yes.
That's fascinating. Wow, I never knew that. That's really interesting.
So again, with an unfortunate incident that happened, really, a
Mm-hmm.
genocide.
Yeah.
And I want to make this very clear. I know it's very controversial, but Jews don't own the term Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
And the Armenians went through one.
So can you kind of just give me some perspective on what is it like right now in Israel? What is the temperament in the city? Where are people at in terms of just their day to day, and kind of, it almost seems like anticipating this ground invasion that's about to take place in Gaza, which is obviously going to be a very risky and complicated situation.
So there's much uncertainty right now in Israel because we haven't gone in. There's a delay because of the hostages. There's a delay because of U.S. pressure and international pressure. What does a ground offensive look like? Ensuring that there's the least amount of civilians in Gaza not being collateral damage. How do you do this offensive? So we're waiting. And because we're waiting, we have to do something to help people move on,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that many communities have been affected by the missiles and stuff. So therefore, we have in particularly in my organization, are helping the first responders with food, with jackets, also making sure that the Christian Arabs in Bethlehem are taken care of. So it's a wait and see approach while we're getting hit by missiles from Gaza into Israel.
What do you see as the pathway forward from this? Like, I think from my interaction with Israelis when I was there, my Israeli friends who kind of travel back and forth, it seems like majority of them share this sentiment that you do. Hey, we want to live in peace with the Palestinian people. It's a complicated history. Many people don't know that Israel, upon their declaration of independence, offered the Arabs their citizenship to Israel. There's obviously been multiple wars fought, and it seems like most people want to live in harmony with everyone there, from the Israeli side. And some of my Palestinian friends as well, though some of them are a bit more hardened, especially recently. What do you see as the pathway forward in this? And I guess what specifically should we be praying for? I talked to Pastor Stephen Corey about this. I talked about how I'm praying that there's wisdom and that there's strategy on the ground in terms of how they're going to go into Gaza. It seems like the weather has been delaying some of that as well. But how do you see the pathway forward from this? And what hopes do you have for the future?
So in my honest opinion, I do really think that Hamas needs to be taken out from the leadership of people living in Gaza. They're a terrorist organization. They abused and used their people. At the end, taking money, building underground tunnels, buying missiles for the whole purpose to achieve what is in their charter, is to eradicate Israel. We're not going anywhere from this land. We're staying. So up until now, we have dealt with a Hamas leadership that occasionally fires missiles into Israel. Went in 2009, 2014, and 2021.
Mm-hmm.
But the brutality of this particular October 7th, just the brutality, because I've seen the pictures and the videos. This is a different type of Hamas leadership that has no problem burning babies and targeting civilians in such a brutal manner. We can't have peace with this leadership, and therefore the leadership must go.
Yeah. I mean that sounds fairly reasonable. Do you see alternatives for the people of Gaza in terms of leadership? Right? Do you see Egypt potentially stepping up? Like how do, if all goes well and Hamas gets removed from Gaza, who do you see stepping up to fill that void in terms of governing Gaza and
it would have to be a joint cooperation between Israel and Egypt. in my humble opinion. You can't do this without Egypt. Originally, Egypt had Gaza in 1967. We took over Gaza, but we left Gaza in 2005. We pulled out. We pulled out even 9,000 Jews from Gush Katif. And the response from Hamas was missile attacks. And therefore, enough is enough. I would have to say again, the Israeli government made a huge security blunder on October 7th. But at the end, the people who perpetrated this was the Hamas leadership. They planned it with Hezbollah and with the backing of money from Iran. Yes, at one time, Hamas was, in the 1970s, the organization providing hospitals and meals and other social justice issues because the PLO wasn't doing what they needed to do to help out the citizens of Gaza. But since the 1980s, has been involved in terrorism. They were the ones who orchestrated the first suicide bombing, and 40% of the attacks in the second Intifada were all Hamas.
Yeah.
So you do need a joint cooperation between Israel and Egypt.
We see, according to the Bible, that prayer is extremely important in terms of us being transformed from the inside out when we get aligned with God's will. For the Christians watching this channel, I want you guys to implement these spiritual disciplines in your day-to-day life. And the only way I've been able to do this consistently is through writing down my prayers in a prayer journal that does a few things. One, it allows me to reflect and come to God humbly and ask him to move on my behalf. And two, it allows me to document my prayers, which ultimately help me remember the very things that I was praying for and see the hand of God tangibly in my life when he answers them. So I would urge you, consider writing down your prayers. It could be in a blank notebook. It could even be on your phone. Or you could check out the one I personally designed and used from my own quiet time and spiritual discipline that I think will be a huge blessing. It's the exact structure and system that I've used for years to pray and be more consistent in my spiritual disciplines. You can pick yours up today by clicking the link in the pinned comment below. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.